Well, hello and welcome to another recording of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We are back for more news, tech content, and wisdom from the world of marketing. I'm joined by the man on a mission to keep marketing simple, the voice of the Marketing and Finance Podcast, and the author of 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Marketing Plans. I give you Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, thank you so much. And of course, my co-host is also a man on a mission, this time to demystify digital marketing. He's the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome Monsieur Pascal Fintoni.
Thank you very much. And thank you to your listeners and viewers for your support. If you can tell that we're in a very, very chirpy mood, it's because, of course, we are approaching our 1 year anniversary. Yes, indeed. A year ago, Roger and I got together with the silly idea of bringing a bit of light entertainment, but also advice and tools and tactics to make you a better marketer and content marketer. But also because the last 2 weeks, Roger, we've had some lovely reactions and comments on the interweb. I'm thinking of Mark Masters, Glenn Gears, who got in touch all the way from the US, Rachel Extons, Phil Goodwin. We also have Richard 𝗬𝗵𝗲, I'm going to say the French way, Callie Willows, Tom Bailey, Jeff Aiken, Laura Perman, Michelle MacArthur, and Chris Nightingale, and Phil Gorman as well. It's wonderful to know people are appreciating the work.
Yeah, actually, Richard 𝗬𝗵𝗲 that you saw there, I went to university with him, and I was absolutely delighted when I saw his face pop up in the LinkedIn feed the other day. And he's one of those people I've just not seen for so long, and you always get that little, oh, look, it's Richard. Or we used to call him Dill at university. I'm pretty sure he doesn't go by that nickname anymore, 30 years on, but it was glorious to see him pop up.
That's the thing about social media. We don't always know who's seeing it. I've had many Zoom calls or encounters where people say, "Oh, I listened to the podcast." I said, "Do you?" Because we just don't know. So do drop us comments and likes and reactions. It always makes a difference. I've had a quick glance at the notes for today, Roger. It's a packed one, and we've got a very, very special film to review in our marketing. So let's get started with In the News.
According to a survey by Wunderkind, 51% of consumers say they have started to receive more impersonal or irrelevant marketing communications over the past 12 months.
And Ryanair has invited 7 customers from 6 European countries to join a customer advisory panel and make recommendations to improve the airline services and customer care.
Pinterest has announced the platform will ban all adverts featuring weight loss language or imagery in an effort to remove multi-level marketing distributors and other shady scammers.
Research from BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, has found that almost 70% of employers are struggling to find workers with the right digital skills, which is costing British industry billions.
Pizza chain Papa John's has been fined by the Information Commissioner's Office for sending more than 160,000 nuisance messages, with one customer claiming they had received almost 100 messages within 2 months.
While small and medium-sized British businesses selling in Amazon recorded over £3.5 billion in export sales last year, according to the platform. The top 5 categories were home, health and personal care, toys, apparel and beauty.
Instagram has published its 2021 Rich List. Number 1 is Cristiano Ronaldo, with an average earning of $1.6 million per post, followed by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Selena Gomez, who earn an average of $1.5 million per post.
Goodness, well, John Lewis is planning to build 10,000 rental homes over the next 10 years. Some properties could be built on John Lewis's car parks, near distribution centres and above Waitrose stores.
Wow. Do you want to live in a John Lewis?
Well, I couldn't help but chuckle because this image of the car park and so on. But I suppose you and I are not the right demographics. We live in the countryside or certainly rural areas. So the idea of going towards car parks, distribution centres or above a busy store leaves me cold. But we know there's a crisis in the UK, certainly, in terms of good rental properties. In the news item, they also announced that you have the choice. You could use and rent John Lewis's furniture or have your own as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've said on the show before, Pascal, that we shouldn't assume that once the pandemic's over that we should all pile back into the cities and go back to the offices to work. And maybe the city centres need to be re-imaged and become more like entertainment hubs, which would make sense that things like John Lewis and perhaps offices of great big consultancy firms might be turned into accommodation instead.
I've been wondering whether they have some data or they are kind of putting a very safe bet on the fact that people will travel less by car or actually access the online shopping more. Therefore, they have all this kind of equity or this estate that they can convert into rental properties.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it absolutely makes sense. You just hope that it does conjure up these dismal images of dank, gloomy car parks, doesn't it? But I'm sure that they'll be able to spruce them up somehow. But most car parks, as far as I know, don't actually have windows, so they're going to have to do something to make them feel less like prison cells and more like accommodations.
I would imagine so. So let's wait and see. I mean, I'm sure they have plans, but I'm guessing it's about using what they own in terms of land in a more sensible way. So let's go straight into the rant of the week, which is about email marketing. You read two news. So 51% of consumers receiving more rubbish for the past 12 months, and Papa John's being fined for sending lots of rubbish. And of course, my inbox and your inbox are also testament that things are just going a bit silly at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Pascal, that I do a segment in my talks where I say that I signed up for a webinar, and the webinar's like a month away, and I get 1 or 2 emails a week in the lead up, and then in the week before they start becoming a couple of times a day, and then in the day before there's like one every hour. And the guy who was organising the webinar is East Coast America, so when I wake up in the morning there are like 8 emails each on the hour, 8 hours to go, 7 hours to go, and you think, come on, we've really got to the stage now where marketing has potentially has crossed the line to become so annoying. And we should, it's this constant rant that we have that digital marketing has crossed the line, and it's all about numbers, and it's all about getting eyeballs on screens, number of likes and stuff like that. And unless it's engaging, it's going to annoy your customer. And annoyed customers are going to unsubscribe. They're not going to buy from you. They're going to block you. It's just not worth it. Put some more thought into engaging the customer. And if that means less emails but more engaging emails, then that's got to be the way forward.
I just don't know why this still carries on. There's two school of thoughts, really, Roger. One, it's working, as in, a small number of people, but actually you get results, so it's worth the fine, it's worth the bad PR in podcasts such as this one, and of course the mainstream press. Or people are just negligent. They just can't tell whether it's working or not. They're just having a task that they want to complete and move on to the next thing. But talking of attempts to do things better, Ryanair, who's not always mentioned for all the right reasons, putting together a customer advisory panel. I mean, to begin with, if I was on a panel, I would try and pull apart their website. But by the by, do you think that's an attempt to, counterattack, some of the bad press they've had recently?
I mean, I have a real weird relationship with Ryanair. As you know, they kidnapped me about 10 years ago, and I just refused to travel with them until very recently. Before the pandemic, I had to fly with them, and it was still a pretty grim experience. So kudos for them for getting a customer advisory panel in place. But the key thing is, will they actually listen to what is being said to them? But then on the other side of the coin, these 7 people that they've got, if those 7 people are happy with Ryanair, dirt cheap prices, and the payback for that, if that's the right word, is crap service and being boxed into an aircraft, really tight seating and all of that sort of thing, then these people might just tell them that they're fine and carry on doing all of the stuff that you're doing. If I was on the panel, I'd be saying, improve your website, improve your service, give us a bit more legroom, and for the love of goodness, serve us the coffees before you try to flog us the scratch cards.
Yeah, I tell you what, I hope they do user journey of their website, though. They have to sort this out. Anyway, torn between having a go at Instagram publishing the rich list. What's the point? The rich are getting richer. But I want to talk about Pinterest very briefly before we move on to the next segment. This idea of a platform like Pinterest taking decisions about what's in and what's out. Now, in terms of their decision, I think those multi-level channel marketings and shady scammers offering tablets and all sorts to help people lose weight, I think that's the right thing. But there's been complaints, obviously, about social media platforms sometimes not doing enough or doing too much, as in, who are you to forbid people from communicating messages? So that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's got to be a very, very fine balance, hasn't it? I mean, when does it become almost like censorship, and when does it become regulation, I guess? And yeah, I'm all for clamping down on these people who are scamming. And let's face it, the number of scams in all sorts of industries, whether it's weight loss, whether it's financial services, there doesn't seem to be a day goes by when, again, you either get text, phone calls or emails from dodgy sources. So yeah, let's clamp down on it. But I hope that Pinterest don't rely upon some sort of algorithm to do this, which inadvertently penalises legitimate people. And there is some sort of human element within this process, which means that legitimate people aren't affected by what they're doing.
Thank you very much, so again, for sharing your reaction to the news. Let's slow things down with the content spotlights. Now, in this segment, Roger and I surprise each other with a discovery from the interweb, a podcast, an article, a video. So what have you got for us this week, Roger?
Pascal, recently I did a content spotlight about using the right sort of phrases when you're talking to people. And it was a really simple one. I think there was only 3 of them. But it really had a profound effect on me. And I've sort of maybe inadvertently been looking for similar sort of things. And there was a couple of news items which caught my attention this week from, again, big industries. And I'm not going to name names because I don't think that we need to do that on this show. But one of them was a fairly high-profile businessman who appears on a TV show, so that might give it away a little bit. But he was making some really quite derogatory comments about some people's anxiety about going back to work after the pandemic. And then I read another news article about a very famous chef who might have been allowing bullying to go on in his restaurants. And it just brought me this whole sort of back to this whole idea of leaders and how leaders should lead and be empathetic with their people. And I came across this article, and it's on a website called Parade, which I don't think I've come across before, but it was the headline that grabbed my attention. And it says, "Want to display your active listening skills? Try using these 33 powerful phrases." And the article is written by Judy Koutsky. So Judy, thanks for the article. Really interesting. I don't propose to read out all 33 phrases, Pascal. I'm sure you'll be relieved to hear that. But again, there's nothing at all rocket science about this. It's just things that really should be common sense. But I think that a lot of the time, common sense seems to go out of the window, especially as businesses get bigger and small companies become big corporates. So, for example, you're having a conversation with somebody, and this whole idea is, are you actually listening to them, or are you just hearing them? And there's a real difference there. Because you can sit there and hear somebody, but you're not actually listening to what they're saying. It's just like background noise. And your mind as a boss or as a consultant or whatever it might just be thinking ahead to what the next question is you want to ask. And this article is saying, no. Use these phrases to show that you're genuinely listening to what people are saying. So things like, number 1, please tell me more. I mean, that sounds really obvious, doesn't it? But people don't use things like, and just a little prompt like "go on," leaning in towards people and showing that you're interested rather than leaning back and putting your hands on your head or something that is a little bit more aggressive, maintaining eye contact. And then as we start progressing through the numbers and we get 4, 5, 6, we start talking about paraphrasing people without parroting. And if somebody says to you how they feel, so the example that Judy gives is that somebody might feel that people misinterpret what you say or people take things that you say the wrong way. And what you can do there is you can actually replay that to people and say something like, yeah, it can be frustrating when people misinterpret what you say, but have you thought of this? And you're effectively playing back to people what the situation is, and things like, please give me more details. Let me see if I got that correct. Are you saying that? And again, I'm not going to read out all 33, but this article is dead simple, and I think that it's well worth, you could read it in 2 minutes, but I think it's well worth sitting down for 10 to 15 minutes and going through all 33 and actually thinking about your role, whatever that might be. We're in marketing, so we do a lot of consultancy, but if you're a leader of a company, if you're a leader of a team, have a think about some of these phrases and ask yourself, how often am I using these phrases? And if you're not, then it's a massive opportunity to become a more engaging leader, consultant, or whatever it is you're doing. So it's all about listening, not about hearing.
Wonderful. And that reminds me a lot of situation I find myself as a consultant when you go in and support teams, and usually you have to report back your work to the senior management team. And very often what they'll say to me is, so I've been promoted almost within the organization, but I've not been given the training to be a team leader, and I've been given the training to supervise others. I've just been given the job because I've been here longer than most. And I think that's also then running a parallel to your own self-development. So you should also be curious about those things. And what I like about those articles, they can also remind you of things that perhaps you knew, but you've not practiced for a while. And I've got to put into this, I'm assuming that it must have been very, very hard as a team leader to have countless Zoom calls or Teams calls. And as a result of which, maybe indeed your interpersonal skills and active listening may have been slightly hindered or become more dormant, and just to kind of reignite your interest in being that, have a positive impact as a leader. I think that's a great addition to what you can do.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's human nature. Our brains are constantly thinking ahead. And when we're listening to somebody, we might inadvertently start to come up with an answer for them or think ahead to the next question. And what we really need to do is to train our brains to slow down and just listen to what they're saying and use these sorts of phrases to encourage them. So, Pascal, what have you got for me this week?
Well, this will not surprise our regular viewers and listeners, but I have something that has a strong correlation with your selection for today. So this is actually the summary of a research paper, a research exercise undertaken by the famous McKinsey firm. Now, I became aware of this article thanks to actually a presenter. I was hosting a virtual conference a few days ago, and we had this digital transformation consultant, Marco Dondi, who opened the conference, talking about the future of work and how digital transformation is not just about the purchasing of tech, but also creating a more human-centered working environment. And he gave this incredibly inspiring presentation using examples from multinationals around the world. But he did also spend just a moment to give us an overview of a recently published paper. Now, the title is, "These are the skills you will need for the future of work." And this was created and compiled by a group of individuals working for McKinsey called Marco Dondi, Julia Klier, Frédéric Panier, Jörg Shubert. And this was published in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. It's actually, just as a quick aside, Roger, the World Economic Forum, what a treasure trove of information as well for all the things we talk about. But what they did really was to explore the future of work in some details, and they wanted to understand the impact of technology AI, automation, machine learning, robotics, things you and I've covered before, and asked the question, what could government and indeed large employers do to make sure that citizens are future-proofed with their skill set, because things are going to change. So they surveyed about 18,000 people across Europe, and they come up with some observations, conclusions, but also recommendations. And what they discovered, that there are 56 from the foundational skills that would really help people, citizens, to future-proof their employability. And what they've done, Roger, those 56 are organized into 4 major groups of skill sets, and then you have some subcategories. So the hyperlink is in the show notes, as is your article. So I'm not going to go through all 56. What I thought I would do is read out to you the 4 major groups, then the subcategories, and see whether you recognize some of the skills and also talents, as they call them, that will really make a difference in someone's career and also job satisfaction. So group number 1 is called cognitive skills. Number 2, interpersonal skills. Number 3, self-leadership. That's interesting. And number 4, digital, which I want to spend just a moment on. Now, within cognitive skills, there are subcategories of critical thinking, which includes active listening, planning and ways of working, communication, and mental flexibility. In interpersonal, they have mobilizing systems, so how to get things started, developing relationships, and teamwork effectiveness. In self-leadership, they have self-awareness and self-management, entrepreneurship, interestingly, and goals achievement. And in digital, they have digital fluency and citizenship, software use and development, and understanding digital systems. I want to spend just a moment to expand on digital being my specialism, Roger. And in digital fluency and citizenship, they have split into digital literacy, so making sense of the information you get online, digital learning, so taking the initiative with your own self-development, digital collaboration, but the last one, which to me is so important, bear in mind what we discussed a moment ago in the news, digital ethics. And what I take from it is that we need to find a way as leaders, governments, and more to make people behave more ethically as citizens, but also professionals online. In the understanding digital systems, they highlighted cybersecurity literacy. And we know that the number of scams and fraud and, of course, victims has gone through the roof the last 12 months. And we need to find a way to protect ourselves and everybody else around us more. And they also, which I thought was fantastic, in there they have tech translation and enablement. So basically, can you explain all this in plain English? So these are the things there. Just before I invite your reaction, they also then did a bit of a survey in terms of where are we now with the participants of the survey. And they were saying that below average were the following: planning and ways of working, communication, in particular, synthesizing messages, making messages clearer. And they also found that we were below average in software use and development and understanding digital systems.
Do you know, I mean, again, this is a theme that's become prevalent on this show over the last few episodes, hasn't it, Pascal? This whole going back to work. And even today, I saw an interview with the Chancellor, 𝗖𝗍𝗍 𝗠𝗏, and he was saying, get back to the office, get back to the office. And I'm sitting there saying, no, this is the opportunity to change the way that we do things. And I think last week we said, some of the practices that we have, like working 9 to 5 and having millions of meetings, some of these go back decades to Henry Ford and meetings in the 60s when we didn't have communications technology. We now have this opportunity to change things. And again, these articles, My Listening Skills, this one about all of these different skills on top of that, are just so crucial for us to redefine and to check in with ourselves so that we can make it better for the employees, make it better for the customers, and ultimately, hopefully, make it better for the world. And again, the digital stuff that you've talked about there, making sure that what we do is ethical. It isn't ethical to send 100 emails over the course of a few days to an individual. I don't think that's ethical. I just think it's just bad practice. So all good signposts for the way that things could be.
Absolutely. And it's just fascinating, isn't it, that the conversation goes back to that. So they're making recommendations, and I want people to read the article. It's one that you could read more than once, Roger, because they really go into the details, but also it becomes like a tool. It could, like, to your point, it could become a system that you use to check on yourself, to talk to the team. It could be something that you could use to stimulate a debate within the organization or indeed your clients. But what they're saying is, we, as in society in general, governments and more, need to start to take action. So number one, can we maybe use AI to our advantage to highlight learning opportunities? We talk about lifelong learning a lot. What does that mean? But also, where do you go? So let's say you want to improve your communication skills, you want to improve your active listening, but how do you do that? Where do you go? So using AI to literally find, but also point you, signpost you to the right courses could be important. They're asking employers, but also education, to start to value skills as much as certification. So what they're saying is you could use those 56 and literally get people to be scored against those, not just whether or not they did a good essay at the end of the year. Can you see the point there, Roger? And so I think those recommendations are very important. And I know that in truth, the UK is often ahead when it comes to looking at skills in addition to certification compared to the rest of Europe, where education still has an element of being quite elitist.
So let's hope that companies might take some direction from the content spotlights that we've spotlighted this week.
Excellent. Right, let's move on to the next segment, Roger. Marketing, tech and apps. Okay, Roger, so what have you found to make life easier as a marketer and content creator?
Well, this week is a little bit random, Pascal, I have to say. Sometimes random's good, though, isn't it? And you just come across some incredible things that might not necessarily immediately help you as a marketer, but might get your creative juices thinking in another direction. Now, here's a couple of things that I came across this week, almost by accident. So I mentioned last week that this new St James Quarter in Edinburgh opened with the rather strangely shaped hotel on top that a lot of people say looks like the poo emoji. Within this shopping centre is a Lego store, and the Lego store has been mobbed ever since this new shopping centre opened. So if you go into the shopping centre, you can expect to queue for quite a while to get into this shop because of the social distancing regulations. And for whatever reason, it just got me thinking about Lego. And so I did a Google search on Lego, and I came across this amazing app, which is really clever and probably completely pointless, but I absolutely absolutely love it. So you know how I can remember this when my son was growing up. We would buy him Lego Star Wars this, Lego City Airport that, Lego TIE Fighter, whatever it was, and of course you get these things built, but eventually the Lego gets deconstructed and gets piled into a big box, and you've got this gigantic box full of stuff, and it just sits there, and you just don't know what to build it anymore. And this app, I actually can't believe I'm saying this. You tip all these Lego bricks onto the floor or onto a surface, a table or something, and you then scan it with this app. It's an iPhone app or an Android app. You scan that pile of Lego bricks, and it's got some sort of AI algorithm in there, and it takes a view of all these bricks, and then it comes back with some suggestions as to what you could build purely from that photograph. And I've watched a video, and it absolutely works. And it's not just random stuff. There's obviously something genuinely powerful going on in the background to create something out of this pile of bricks. No matter whether it originally came from a TIE Fighter or a city airport or whatever it is. Now, I just thought to myself, this is just unbelievably fabulous, but did somebody actually ask for this? How did they come up with the idea for it? And are they making any money from it? But it just blew my mind that somebody thought that there was a need for an app like this. But having said that, seeing how many people are queuing up to go into the Lego store in the new Edinburgh shopping centre suggests that perhaps there is a market for apps like this. So the lesson for me there is, don't dismiss something that might sound totally and utterly fanciful. There might actually be a need for it.
This is
And
genius. Sorry, I just need to react to this. This is because
No.
I'm almost going to tell my sister about it with my nephews who've got boxes of Lego bricks. And
Yeah.
I tell you, I suspect these were parents during the pandemic pleading with Lego, saying, "Can you send me more sketches?" Because I think you get a map, don't you? You get a manual of instructions about how to build it. But once you build it once or twice, what else can you do? So I wouldn't be surprised if people got in touch, because the Lego fan base is very, very active, aren't they? I mean, they keep in touch with each other, they support each other. They really are big, loyal fans of the brand, and Lego does an amazing job to communicate with them. So, and look at the application in the world of business. Could you have a pile of bricks, and then John Lewis can build the apartment they spoke about, much easier.
Yeah, and then you'll have somebody going along to Legoland in Windsor with a sledgehammer and smashing all the buildings down, and then using the app to take a photograph to see whether the app suggests that they build the Tower of London back up. It just absolutely boggles the mind. And the second one, again, is random in a way. It's a year this week since we did the first Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast. It's also a year to last night, Thursday, that my wife and I started a little trend that we've done ever since, and that was choosing a random bottle of red wine on a Thursday and obviously drinking it. And I tweet a photograph of the bottle out on Twitter, and I call it Random Red Thursday. And the tweet's gone out every week for 52 weeks now, and last night was the 1 year anniversary. And again, that prompted me to think, I've not thought about wine apps recently. So I came across this one called Vivino, the Vivino app. Now, admittedly, there are others out there that are very, very similar to what this one does. And Vivino itself is a wine merchant. But what they do is you can use the app to take a photograph of the bottle of wine that you've got. Now, of course, mine's totally random. We just basically pick one off the shelf in Tesco, in Sainsbury's, in wherever it might be. And usually we just pick it on the basis of, I quite like the look of that label. You take a photograph with the Vivino app, and it does its little thinking, and bang, it pops up and tells you all about this wine. And I've had a pretty much 100% success rate with this. The only time it didn't recognise a bottle was because I'd taken the photograph from a slightly wrong angle, and it said retake the photograph in this way, and it found the bottle of wine. And it tells you about the grape, it tells you about the vintage, it tells you about the processes, it gives you indications as to what the flavours of the wine might be. It gives notes of vanilla or notes of blackberry, all of that sort of stuff. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And again, they've put this app together predominantly to sell themselves as a wine merchant, but they've gone further, because obviously the wines that I picked, they don't actually stock as a wine brand, so they're not getting anything from my interaction with it. But what they're hoping is that people like me interacting with their app will eventually make us want to buy from them. And again, it's just a genius idea, but it's content, isn't it? It's another way of giving people a bit more information about the bottle of wine that they are drinking. And it also allows you to review the wine as well and put your own little review in it, and people can follow you and stuff like that. So again, nice little application, which on the whole, I would never have thought of downloading something like that, but now I have done. And if we carry on doing Random Red for another year and beyond, then each week I'll be photographing the bottle, and now I'll have a better record of what we've been drinking.
No, absolutely. What is interesting for our viewers and listeners is, whilst your fan base won't be as extensive as Lego, on the rare occasion you've been a little late or missed the Thursday, people are asking you, "What's happening, Roger? Where's the wine?" I've seen the reaction on Twitter. Well, interestingly for me, a similar theme about giving a bit extra, going further. I've been having a lot of conversation with customers recently about online customer care, standing out from the crowd, making you in my marketing, being obviously engaging, not an irritant. And I've been doing some research even for my business, because people have said to me recently, love the content, but by gum, Pascal, it's hard to keep track, or sometimes it's hard to get back to something that I want to look into. And they literally have said to me, if only you had like an app And I think it was just like a throwaway comment. And that got me into this research project once again, Roger. And I came across this company called glideapps.com. And if you have indeed data, whether that's content, wine lists, whatever you have, whether you have data that could fit into a Google Sheets, their version of Microsoft Excel, you can within minutes create a free of charge app for your customer base, for your prospects, for indeed your community. Examples that they have hundreds of templates for you to choose from. But for example, a podcast app, Roger, where you could start to group the podcast into themes and people be able to choose episodes looking at the archives of what you've done over the years with the Marketing and Finance podcast and make it easier for them. And I think it's all about convenience. You could also, if you are organizing a one-day conference, have an app for that. Not only can people go back and check what's happening throughout the day, but they can chat with each other as attendees. You could also have a very simple CRM. Indeed, you could have a membership app. I was thinking out loud again, to give real life to this idea of an app where people have bought the 𝗬𝗲 and Marketing Plans book, but they can also access further additional resources, perhaps mentioned in the book, but they can join the membership and they have an app that you could have a simple mobile store, but also the one that was very interesting for me, they also have some e-learning apps. So maybe some more private videos, maybe some tutorials and so on, that is only accessible if you're part of the fan base and you can access the app. So I was already impressed with the speed at which you can create the apps. That could also be, Roger, a proof of concept. So you may want to invest into creating an app, but before you do so, test the market with the free version. They also have some chargeable templates, but frankly, between $15 or $50 to get a full-on e-learning platform, I think that's really quite attractive. Not the other way in which you can give extra is on Canva. Probably the second or third time that Canva has made the marketing tech and apps, but they keep adding new stuff, Roger. What can you do? And recently, all of us are now able to record ourselves. So if you use any templates on Canva and you want to upload media, photography, video, whatever it might be, you can now also record yourself using webcam and microphone. So why would you want to do that? But I've got many customers who offer free of charge Canva templates for their customers, part of content marketing, part of the added value of being part of the customer base. So what I've suggested to them is, why don't you create, of course, the template, but at the top of the template, there is a video welcoming people to the Canva template, explaining how to make good use of it and letting them know how they can get in touch if you have more questions. And just think again, sometimes it's all there in front of us, but it takes a bit of creative thinking, a bit of lateral thinking, or listening more actively to your customers to come up with those little small advantages that can make you stand out, but also give you more PR potentially.
Yeah, this is so interesting. Again, what we're also finding with all this technology is that things just a few years ago, which were beyond the budgets of small companies, are now accessible to everybody. I was just thinking, however long ago it might have been about 8 or 9 years, and I was still working in big corporate at that point, and we invested in an iPhone app. And I seem to remember at the time that it didn't do a massive amount, but it probably cost about 25 to 30,000 quid to get a company to build this app for us. Now, a couple of years ago, I was working with a company who were running a conference, and they wanted to put an app together, and a similar build was about $5,000. Now, effectively, you've got something here, and I assume that it's relatively simple, but you can put something together, again, at a fraction of the cost. So it's not just the fact that we've got all this great technology available to us, it's the fact that now it's the accessibility from a cost point of view. And anything that Canva do is fantastic. I'm a massive Canva fan. In fact, I've got Canva open on my desktop here because I've been doing some graphics for another customer, but I hadn't even noticed that you could record in Canva now. So again, something that I will check out later.
Absolutely. And just very quickly on Canva, this is the idea that I've got. in and around customer care. But of course, imagine you could actually record short video messages and stitch them together on Canva and create potentially a great video for other purposes. Right, Roger, but as we say every single week, none of this would be possible without the work of pioneers and visionaries from the recent and distant past. Let's move on to This Week in History.
In 1844, Captain J.N. Taylor of the Royal Navy demonstrates the first foghorn. At the time, it was called a telephone, to mean far signalling by loud sounds from ships or trains.
In 1868, American inventor and newspaper publisher Christopher Sholes is issued a patent for the first practical typewriter and the original QWERTY keyboard layout still in use today.
In 1926, the first underwater colour photograph is taken by Charles Martin and Dr. William Longley. The picture of a hogfish was captured using a waterproof housing for the camera and several pounds of highly explosive magnesium flash powder.
Crikey. Well, in 1983, Nintendo releases the Famicom system, short for Family Computer, in Japan. But 2 years later, the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, is launched in the US, making Nintendo the premier company in the video game industry.
In 1985, German electric engineer and mathematician Karl-Heinz Brandenburg sends an email around his office announcing the MP3 file extension won a poll and that the old .bit file extension should no longer be used.
The same year, 1985, Prince Charles and Princess Diana officially opened Live Aid at the Wembley Stadium in London. In the triumph of technology, the 16-hour Super Concert was globally linked by satellite to more than 1 billion viewers in 110 nations.
In 1991, the movie Point Break, directed by Catherine Bigelow and starring Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves, Laurie Petty and Gary Busey, premieres at 𝗬𝗲 Cinema on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles.
And in 2013, the world's last telegram is sent in India as email and texting have replaced the 163-year-old service. The telegram delivery ceased in 2006 in the US and 2 years later in Great Britain.
Wow.
2008, people were still sending telegrams. Wow.
It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Yeah. We need to launch this product. Stop. As soon as possible. Stop. Ends.
I think in my lifetime, I only saw my parents getting one telegram once from my grandparents, because I don't think they had a phone or anything like this. But that was just, and even to me as a young child, it was a bit bizarre to have the postman delivering a telegram. Can I just confess that I absolutely adore Point Break, 1991 movie. It is so good. And for me, 91 is the year that I arrived in the UK, as you may remember. And I was missing dearly the seaside. I spent my youth in the Atlantic coast surfing with my brothers and sisters and friends. I was missing surfing terribly because the water is far too cold in the UK, even if you go to Cornwall. And Point Break was just my fix. I kept watching it over and over again for the surfing scenes, but of course the amazing action and thrilling chase scenes between Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those classics, isn't it? Absolute classics, and probably should be featured in the film marketing section of this podcast at some point in the future.
Do you remember watching Live Aid? Where were you?
Yes. Oh, well, I mean, wow. Live Aid was just epic, wasn't it? Now, interestingly enough, I was actually on holiday in Spain when Live Aid went out, and I was actually on holiday with my buddies. I'm just trying to think back. It might have been the first year that I went on holiday without my parents, or it might have been the second year. But of course, we were all massive music fans. So there was 5 of us on holiday in Spain, and we were all into all the groups that were going to appear at Live Aid: Status Quo, U2, Queen, and all of that. And of course, there was also the Philadelphia concert happening in parallel, and they sort of switched between acts during the day. And of course, we were staying in Spain in an apartment which didn't have a TV. And we had to go and find a bar that had a TV. And I mean, this is almost incomprehensible to people who've grown up with smartphones and massive TVs. But in those days, they weren't that as prevalent, and we actually had trouble finding a bar that actually had a TV, and eventually we did find one, and it was a relatively small, quite dingy little bar down a back street in this little village, and the television screen was probably no bigger than an iPad, maybe slightly bigger, and was one of those old-fashioned TVs with a great big bulbous bit at the back. I even thinking now it may even have been black and white. No, I think it was definitely colour. And we stayed in this bar pretty much all day watching Live Aid, and it didn't matter that the screen was small and that the loudspeaker on the television was pretty ropey. The spectacle of watching that concert. And there was more people in the bar, of course, singing along to the songs. And as you would expect, as the day went on, we were drinking more beer, and it just become a bit more raucous until towards the end. It was just a bit of a free for all ruck. I mean, I've got massive memories about that. And of course, at home, back in the UK, my father had been ordered to record the entire thing on VHS tape, which he diligently did. And I think we had about 7 or 8 VHS tapes during the day. So when we got back from our holiday, me and my 5 buddies actually went and sat in our living room on our comfy chairs and watched it on a relatively decent sized TV.
It was just incredible. We watched, I think we spent the day in different houses, so literally playing kind of hopping across different living rooms throughout the day. For me, it was just this, I just couldn't believe that all those stars had agreed to it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And this brainchild of Bob Geldof and his team had come to fruition, and of course the strong message and the main thrust of was obviously raising funds to support Africa. And for me, there's also the memory of watching the concert. And then days later, Bob Geldof at the door, number 10, giving Margaret Thatcher a hard time because she wanted to tax the concert, if you remember. Which 20 years later, when they did it again, of course, the Labour government said no taxes, just as a little jibe. So, and you're right. I think it's one of those where you had to be there, you had to be around. And I suspect for younger viewers and listeners, they can access replays on YouTube nowadays, and there must be DVDs and Blu-rays of the event. But there was just something extraordinary about the accomplishment of the event itself, but also, as mentioned a moment ago, the technology that was able to beam this concert around the world in 1985. It was just extraordinary.
And I mean, the performance by Queen is still... And it's my personal opinion, but a lot of people also have this opinion. That 20-minute set that they did is one of the best performances by a rock band ever. And, you know, it was, I mean, we know that they rehearsed it to the note for weeks in advance, and I think quite a lot of the other groups didn't, and it showed. But Queen, and I've watched quite a lot of reaction videos of youngsters now who weren't even born when Live Aid happened, watching that performance by Queen, and most of them who do it almost sit there, with their mouths open, because you just don't get people like Freddie Mercury who can control a crowd like that today.
No, I think the closest I've seen was actually the tribute concert to Freddie Mercury and Guns N' Roses kind of opening up, the event. That's where the closest I've seen to, that almost symbiotic relationship between the crowd and the performers. But, do you know, in some ways, this Live Aid kind of conversation means that everything else pales into insignificance as a news item. And it feels probably right that we should move on to the creator shout-outs. So, Roger Edwards, who is under the spotlight this week?
Well, do you know, Pascal, we do live in a mad world, don't we? And we're coming out of the pandemic, obviously, and that's good. And indications are that we're getting back to normal. But, when the UK government stood up earlier in this week and basically said, we're taking all the restrictions away at the time when infections are rising higher than they've ever been, and the fact that even though the vaccine is working, we've not vaccinated everybody. I just found myself sitting there saying, what the is going on? I'm not allowed to swear on the podcast, but you get what I mean. And I came across, Pascal, a podcast with exactly that title. What the is going on? F******. What the F is going on? And it's by a comedian called Mark Steele, who I have to say I've not come across. And it's a relatively new podcast. In fact, there are only 4 episodes. And I put the first episode on when I was driving down to a class recently. And I was absolutely in hysterics by the time I arrived where I was going. Because obviously it's a little bit rude, it's a little bit sweary, but he articulates exactly how I feel about quite a lot of the things that are happening in the world. And it's a little bit like our show. There's lots of little segments, and he gets people on, so there's guests coming on to talk about things, but they keep repeating this phrase, what the is going on. And what I love about it is they've got about 5 or 6, maybe even 10 different jingle versions of what the is going on, one of which sounds as though it was recorded by a rock band, maybe a Queen-like rock band. Then you've got one that sounds like a choir in a church, one very evangelistic sounding one. And I just found myself, it's very... I can't remember the last time I listened to a comedy podcast, watched a comedy TV program that genuinely had me laughing, out loud, and this was it. So it's not really a marketing podcast. It's more of a fun shout out. But I do like exploring, as you know, humour and whether we can learn anything for putting humour into our presentations, into our content. So I'm doing it anyway. So Mark Steele, thank you for what the is going on.
And also, the advice that we give often, Roger, is look elsewhere for inspiration.
Yes.
So by exploring and reflecting on the production style and format of this podcast, you might find something that could be useful for you. That's fascinating. So for me, the spotlight is on an individual that somehow I've known for a very long time without knowing who he was. Let me explain to you, Roger. For many, many years, like you, I've been using apps, I've been exploring and using websites, I've been very useful to my business without knowing who was behind it. The gentleman I want to actually give a shout out to is James Cridland, who is the editor of Pod News. This is a daily e-briefing that you get in your inbox that gives you a quick snapshot of what's happening in the world of podcasting and audio production, from different brands doing different things, buying each other out, podcast jobs as well as events. And it's just so lovely things you can scan read within moments. And indeed, sometimes I've used some of the news items to inspire me for our podcast. But the reason why it is someone that has been part of my professional life for a very long time is that James Cridland is also the owner and creator of media.info, which is the ultimate resource if you want to build a PR campaign of contacts in the world of print media, TV, and radio. And I recommend it all the time to my customers when we do content marketing strategies. He's also actually been starting in audio, which is why he's also a audio futurologist since the 90s. He's been part and parcel of the team who built the first radio streaming service for Virgin Radio. He's also part of the team that worked on BBC iPlayer and Radio Player. And I almost feel a little guilty that I wasn't aware of the individual as a person sooner, but realized that he's been part of my professional life for many, many years. So long overdue shout out through the back door in a way, thanks to his Pod News e-briefing service, which is actually a delight as well.
So I'm so glad that James has now been given the credit that he's due on Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, and that's what we're about, Pascal. Some of these people we know, some of these people are in our network, some people aren't in our network, but we genuinely appreciate the amount of time and effort and work that goes into the content that they produce, and that's why we're so happy to give these shout outs.
Well said, Rod. Thank you very much. Right, it is time for film marketing. Now, Roger, typically you and I, when we do the film marketing segment, choose a film we love and then discover afterwards that the marketing campaign is quite exceptional and a source of inspiration. For this film, not only do we love the film, but we knew in advance that the marketing campaign was just genius. And I just can't wait to talk to you and get your reaction on Skyfall, the 23rd James Bond movie released in 2012.
Wow, Pascal. Skyfall, you're absolutely right. Phenomenal movie. Rewatched it last week. Just coincidentally, not in preparation for this, but obviously helped prepare for this. Great film. And yes, I knew a lot about the marketing that was happening because it's only 9 years ago. But when I was looking into it in a little bit more detail over the last few days, it was one of those rabbit hole times when you just dive in and think, oh my goodness, I didn't realise they'd done this. And look at the amount of money that was spent here. It truly is one of the most interesting and uplifting marketing campaigns. And it's not just the distributors of the film that were doing the marketing for this. They had all sorts of product placement partners, which were also running incredibly expensive campaigns as well at the same time. So the world was flooded with Skyfall stuff.
Absolutely. And this is what's going to be exciting because, once again, I reckon there's a lot of little lessons in there for all of us as marketers, but they exploited events such as the Olympic Games. They also took advantage of the fact that this was the 50th anniversary of the James Bond franchise. 62 was Dr. No, and 2012 was Skyfall. But also, as you say, were the partners. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the film element or the film distributors' effort. Then we'll talk about the partners. But before we get into that, am I right in guessing that Skyfall is perhaps one of your favorites with Daniel Craig as at the helm?
Yeah, and this is interesting because everybody raves about Casino Royale. That was the reboot, wasn't it? That was Daniel Craig's first film, and it was a great film, But at the same time, they made a conscious decision to maybe move away from some of the cheesier elements of Bond films. So in Casino Royale, we didn't have Q, we didn't have Miss Moneypenny, we didn't even have the traditional opener where the sort of circle goes across the front and he walks along and shoots a bullet at the screen. And to a certain extent, I always thought, that's a little bit disappointing. They've gone away from the James Bond standard, but maybe they needed to do that to genuinely reboot it. And I think that for me, Skyfall started to reintroduce some of those more traditional Bond elements, like we meet Q again for the first time, we meet Miss Moneypenny, and then, there's maybe a few of the quips starting to come back. So it felt to me like it was more of a traditional James Bond film than Casino Royale was, but I didn't think they took it so far that they went cheesy and as some of the poorer entries to the canon earlier on. So for me, it's almost like the archetypal James Bond film of the Daniel Craig era.
What is interesting about the work with Daniel Craig, again, as James Bond, I find Casino Royale and Skyfall are the strongest. I'm really not sure about Quantum of Solace, and I was very disappointed by Spectre. There was something just didn't work for me. And I'm thinking, so is that what it takes? That every other James Bond is better, so we can really look forward to No Time to Die. In terms of this film as well, just to give us a segue into the marketing, the one thing that they did away with, which I thought was very interesting, was usually there's always a bit of a love affair, or there's always the Bond girl that kind of stands out and becomes almost an accomplice in the story. And here that didn't take place. I mean, there was definitely an attractive woman as part of the storyline, but there wasn't that element of the love affair.
Yeah, again, this fascinates me because I would probably have to go back and check, but I think the first of all of the James Bond films up until Daniel Craig finished with him snogging a woman in some exotic location, or in a speedboat marooned in the middle of the ocean, or in the middle of a desert or something. It always had that ending where he went off into the sunset with the Bond girl from that film, but all of the Daniel Craig movies, the first three of them, end with him without the girl. Because in Casino Royale, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 dies, unfortunately, in 𝗏𝗏𝗏 of Solace. And I agree with you, 𝗏𝗏𝗏 of Solace was a bit of a mess for me, but that film ends with him just walking away into the snow. And Skyfall, again, finishes with him in M's office, the new M, saying, "Yep, let's get back to work." But I did wonder whether almost the Judi Dench M was effectively the Bond girl, the surrogate Bond girl in this movie, because obviously the latter half of the movie is all about James Bond trying to protect her from Mr. Silver, who was the villain, and she was not a Bond girl in the traditional sense, but she was a very close, almost mother-like figure. I don't know whether that's the right way.
Yeah, I think that's true, because what we do in Skyfall is explore elements of his younger years. We know so little. I must confess, I've not read any of the books, so maybe there's more information for people who are big fans of Bond and read the books as well as watched the films. But yeah, I think for me, Skyfall works because of all these elements that have been taken out, and what's left is just an incredible, thrilling story. And of course, an amazing villain. Javier Bardem just does an amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, that story, as he comes down in this lift, and the lift's right in the back of the shot, and Bond sat on a chair in the front of the shot, and he basically walks from the lift to Bond very slowly and tells this story about an island with rats on it and how they put the rats into a box. And he just delivers the story as he walks very menacingly and very slowly forward, and that is a mesmerising part of the film. No action, it's just a monologue, bit of storytelling, but the way he delivered it was really quite chilling.
Before we move on to the marketing, is there maybe one standout moment or scene for you in the Skyfall?
Actually, I'm always a big fan of the pre-credit sequences in James Bond films, and again, this one is superb. And there's the bit which it just made me laugh, and again, it was that sort of return to a little bit of the sort of the one-liners, the cheesy bit. So he's trying to get the villain who's on this train, and there's a digger. I don't even know how the digger got there, but there's a digger on the train, and he uses the digger to sort of latch onto this train, and the train's falling apart, and he basically jumps from one carriage to the other, and he lands in the middle of this carriage, and the carriage is disintegrating, and he just takes a moment to adjust his cufflinks before he walks forward. I just thought that is an absolutely archetypal Bond moment.
Yeah, that's absolutely the whole chase around Istanbul and the train. For me, the bit that stood out, I mean, they're all amazing, particularly the last chapter when they go to Scotland and we discover what Skyfall stands for. But the bit in Shanghai with the player with neon lights against glass panes and trying to obviously get to the baddie and so on. I thought the whole cinematography, would have been a nightmare practically to film, but also just look stunning and mesmerizing. So that was great. So what we're going to do, let's start with the film marketing efforts of the filmmakers themselves. Then we're going to talk about the partners. So it all began almost to the date a year before the film was released with Twitter. The official 𝗬𝗏 Twitter account, of Facebook account, started to announce something was coming. And that is one thing that I like about the whole Bond franchise, is that they keep social media going even after the film. I've been quite critical, haven't we, in the past, of people do social media for a few months and then literally walk away from the lot. Literally on Twitter and Facebook, even to the last week, Roger, they are still promoting Skyfall with behind the scenes stuff, with extract from the film, with stills from the film, with anniversaries, birthdays of the actors. It really feels like Skyfall is kept alive even after all these years, because in 2021 they are still using Twitter and Facebook to promote it.
Yeah, and I think I'm right in saying that Skyfall was probably the first Bond film which was a major social media campaign. And as you say, they started the activity 12 months before the film. And that's a remarkable way of building up the tension and building up the anticipation for this next James Bond film. And I guess the gap between 𝗏𝗏𝗏 of Solace and Skyfall was a little bit longer than normal. And what a great way to use a new media to start getting that anticipation going. And they got thousands and thousands and thousands of hits, and they really used it quite well. And I think the lesson for me is that, we quite often are critical of people who say, oh, look, here's the latest shiny new toy, Clubhouse or whatever it might be, TikTok, and we just need to jump onto it because you have to. You could almost say, well, is that not what the distributors were doing? Oh, here's Twitter. It's only been around for a little while. Let's dive in and use it. But they used it so well, and I think that's the lesson. The shiny new toys are okay as long as it genuinely gets to your audience, and your audience are there. And I think that they used it spot on, in my opinion.
If you go on Facebook for people who are interested, literally go on the official Facebook page, there is a search function which makes it very easy, and just put 2012 as the year, and literally you can analyze and review the campaign, step by step. But more importantly, my point earlier, they are talking about Skyfall as early as last week, which I think is very, very important. But you're right, they had a 12-month campaign on socials, and then finally fans were rewarded with the first teaser trailer in May 2012.
Yeah, and the trailer is quite dark. It chooses quite a lot of the darker shots from the film, and it almost creates this mystique around James Bond. It includes the bit with him jumping into the carriage and adjusting his cufflinks, which again is very, very memorable. But you do want to see the film because it's showing there's something a little bit different going on here.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Bond unhinged and reacting to the term Skyfall. And that's what, to me, actually, the teaser trailer works better than the normal trailers, which we're going to talk about in a moment. I just like the intrigue. But from May, bear in mind that the release was late November 2012. Then soon after, they piggyback, of course you would, the 2012 Olympic Games. And we have this all incredible moment where James Bond is essentially escorting the Queen for her to officially open the games, and we see all of us on national television, perhaps internationally, we see the Queen jumping off the helicopter, opening a Union Jack parachute, very much like in one of the old James Bond with Roger Moore. But that went, talk about viral marketing.
Oh, that was an absolute genius moment, and I loved that hark back to the earlier film. I think it was Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, you're right.
That had that in. I mean, it was great, and I think I remember watching the opening of the Olympics purely because I wanted to see this scene with the Queen that had been teased in advance.
Now, perhaps, unfortunately for the marketers, the video of Bond and the Queen jumping off the helicopter has been viewed more often than the trailers themselves, but that's the way it goes. So the day after, we have the TV campaign, 30-second spots, but soon after we have the international trailer, much longer than the teaser trailer, understandably so, and in my view, not as good because it gives a lot away. Literally the movie is summarized almost chronologically, and we can see what's going to happen to Bond, but it still doesn't take away the pleasure of watching the 2.5-hour film. But I thought the international trailer could have done with more intrigue, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't like it when the trailers effectively give the whole plot away, and I think this one did. So the teaser trailer for me was much more teasing, I guess.
No, absolutely. Then, so the social media continues, the PR, the press, and so on. But of course, in October 2012, a month, give or take, before the release of the film, we have Adele's song, Skyfall, blasted all over radio stations around the world. And what a song.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, as you said before, it was released on the 50th anniversary of the original James Bond film, Dr. No. They called it James Bond Day. To me, it was one of the best theme tunes we've had for quite a long time. For those musically minded as well, I think it's one of the first James Bond theme tunes for quite a while, which actually includes the hook of the James Bond theme, da, 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 in the actual melody of the song. And if you go way back to From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, they always had that hook within the song to remind you that even though this was sung by Tom Jones or Shirley Bassey, whoever it was still a Bond theme. And they sort of stopped doing that for a while. And I think that Skyfall was the first one for 30 years maybe, which actually had snippets of the actual James Bond theme in the actual theme song for the film.
And therefore, I mean, people love the song. I don't think anybody was unhappy with the song. If anything, it was really what you wanted for Bond films. And then a few weeks later, the really extravagant opening of the movie, the first Bond actually to be shown on IMAX screen in the history of the Bond movies at the Royal Albert Hall, which just stunning premiere. And then the movie has success, the Blu-rays released soon after and so on. Now, you could argue, Roger, that's a pretty good campaign, but no, we also have the partners who add in another layer of excitement, from drinks companies to perfume to mobile phones, you name it. So I know you've done the research, so kick us off with the first partner then.
Well, I mean, this is where I said I almost went down a rabbit hole. Now, we know that product placement has always been a big thing in Bond films. You know, way back, I can remember seeing posters for British Airways in Moonraker, for example, and even more up to date when we rewatched Casino Royale recently. I noticed that the phones were Sony Ericssons, and they feature quite heavily in this film as well. But the scale of product placement within Skyfall is phenomenal, and the amount of effort that the brands behind those product placements went to support the marketing of the film are absolutely mind-blowing. So, for example, Heineken were one of the product placements within the film. You'll notice Bond swigging from a bottle of Heineken. Now, they paid something like £28 million for that product placement in that film. And actually, that covered a third of the production costs of the film itself. Just think about that for a moment. One bit of product placement covered a third of the production costs of the film. And we see all sorts of different things like that. So you've got the Tom Ford tailored suits, you've got the Sony hardware all the way through the film. Heineken I've mentioned. It's just incredible. And each of those people then went on to do their own massive marketing campaign around that product placement. So we had a campaign which was called Intelligence Gathered, which was the Sony one, where you've got TV spots with Daniel Craig as Bond being tracked by a mystery woman, and she's using Bravia TV and VAO laptops, tablets, Xperia T smartphones, all of that sort of thing. You know, the motorbike in the front of the film in the chase in Morocco, again, Honda, massive push around that. But I think, Pascal, the one that stands out for me was the Coca-Cola tie-in.
Yeah.
They came up with the most genius bit of work. So they wanted to unlock the 007 in you. They wanted you to be James Bond for a moment. And they set up this thing in a station in Europe, and they were offering free tickets to go and see Skyfall. And it was quite simply a Coca-Cola drinks machine. And when you put your money in, if you wanted to play this game, it would give you 70 seconds to run to a specific part of that station in order to get your free tickets for Skyfall. Now, if you didn't get there in 70 seconds, you didn't get your ticket. If you did, you got your ticket. And so you've got all these people chasing through a station, just like James Bond would chase a villain through a station to get their tickets. And of course, they filmed people doing this and did a montage of this and put this thing up on YouTube. And again, like the Olympic video, this one went absolutely viral again. I mean, what an absolutely genius idea. And they obviously spent a lot of money on it. But to me, Skyfall was a marketing effort by the distributors, but what was remarkable about it was things like this being done by the product placement partners, and some of their executions were off the scale.
And what was interesting for me, it felt as though, because, you know, for me, with the Bond franchise, it's probably the only movies that get away with product placement to the degree that it does. It's almost as if we are complicit in accepting it. But the brands had immense fun with their marketing. So it's not as if it was, well, we are sponsoring Bonds. If you take Heineken, if we take Sony, if you take Honda, they did adverts using their brand, but at the end, it was the call to action was to go and see the film. It wasn't to go and buy more beers or buy more computers. And I thought that was really, really elegant in the execution, even though it was dead obvious. So with the Heineken one, we follow the story of this young man looking a little like a spy, and he's being chased by a baddie on the train. And there's little nods to all the previous James Bond movie, including Dr. No. And at the end, he reaches the bar inside the train, where we see James Bond himself, Daniel Craig, giving him a bottle of Heineken and disappearing, leaving it to deal with the baddies. I thought it was very clever. Sony, you mentioned it, this woman tracking him, and at the end he says, looking for someone, and using different... At the time as well, I had a Sony Vaio, and I felt so good that I had the same laptop as James Bond, I can't tell you. But with Honda, what they did very cleverly as well was the adverts in and around mechanics, targeting obviously motorbike lovers, and they were part of the team that put together the Bond in Motion exhibition, that celebrating 50 years of Bond vehicles at Beaulieu, not far from London, and they use it for a 4-month campaign. So everybody played the game. It wasn't like they were trying to say, right, well, let's do more of the sales push using Bond. They were saying they were complicit in creating supplementary form of marketing that fitted superbly with the traditional, let's call it that, filmmakers' effort. And that, to me, that's what made the Skyfall marketing campaign special, because everybody was working together, pushing the movie in the same direction.
And it makes me realise now the consequences of all the delays that have been applied to No Time to Die, because I've read, there's a similar level of product placement within this film, and presumably there's brands out there who have got campaigns maybe similar to Coca-Cola, Honda did before. They've got things ready to go, and they've had to hold back on them for obvious reasons. And I believe that certain scenes within the film have had to be reshot or even after effected in some ways to update the products that were in the film when it was originally filmed 2 years ago to the more up-to-date version, so that the product placements can still work.
Yeah. So 2012, what a special year for Bond, 50-year anniversary. The games taking place in London with the eyes of the world onto you. And of course, just to wrap up our review of this campaign, it was only natural that Visit Britain would then milk it for another year after that. Bond is Great Britain was the slogan that went around pretty much everywhere. And we had, of course, that campaign that sustained it. And it just feels like, not only, like I said, is it a great movie, we love the movie, but I just had enough recollection of the marketing campaign to know that this was a great addition to film marketing.
Yeah, no, this has been so exciting, because I don't think I've ever come across a film before where it was such an amazing collaboration between the distributors and their partners. A whole plethora of different marketing campaigns targeting different products and different people, but all coming together with the one aim of getting people to sit in a cinema and watch this film Skyfall.
Yeah, and that's the lesson. We can all take advantage of anniversaries. We can all take advantage of events around this. We can all bring together partners to kind of join on this marketing push. We just need to engage that imagination. So thanks again, Roger, for doing the research on the Skyfall. It's been a pleasure to discuss it with you. And of course, I'll be watching it tonight.
Absolutely right.
Everyone, this has been episode 49 of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Please leave comments, suggestions in the usual places. Until the next one, go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni, and he was Roger Edwards.